Hi, everyone. Apologies for the slight delay, but we're good now. Technology. Okay. Well, we were really hoping to host this session in person here at Jerusalem, but we're still not exactly there in terms of COVID, and the weather is not that great today either. So we're happy to host all of you here on Zoom. This allowed us to get more people to join, including for Turkey, which is wonderful. My name is Gallia Nathan. I am the director of the Leonard Davis Institute for International Relations at the Hebrew University. And this event has been made possible thanks to cooperation with Mitvim, the Israeli Institute for Regional Foreign Policies, the Leonard Davis Institute, and the UIK, the Turkish IR Council. Last week, as most of you know, Israeli President Herzog held a very significant official visit to Turkey after a very long period of tense relations. Now, at least here in Israel, this visit and its huge significance were somewhat lost in the overwhelming media attention to the events unfolding in the Ukraine. However, this is indeed a historic visit, and the relations between Israel and Turkey are extremely important for both states and perhaps for other states in the region as well. And I also think the importance of these relations is perhaps even greater now in light of the growing international uncertainties and very complex maneuvering challenges that both states are now facing. So the purpose of this panel is to explore the future of these relations. We have with us here today 6 distinguished participants. Professor Meliha Altunışık, who is a professor of international relations at the Middle East Technical University in Ankara. Professor Çağrı Erhan, I hope I'm good on this, is the rector of the Altunışık University. Dr. Gil Murciano here is the CEO of Mitvim, the Israeli Institute for Regional Foreign Policies, and the co-organizer of this event, Dr. Gallia Lindenstrauss. She should have waved, I guess, is a senior research fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies, specializes in Turkish foreign policy. And I have to say, Gallia is also a former postdoc fellow at the Davis Institute, so I'm very happy to make this connection. We also have with us Professor Mustafa Aydın, who is a professor of international relations at Kadir Has University in Istanbul and the president of the International Relations Council of Turkey. And last but not least, we have with us Dr. Salih Bıçakcı, who is a professor of international relations also at Kadir Has and a very active co-organizer and initiator of this event. So what we plan to do in the little less than an hour and a half that we have here is we will proceed with 4 brief presentations, like 7 to 10 minutes, by Professor Erhan, Dr. Lindenstrauss, Professor Altunışık, and Dr. Murciano. And then if Professor Aydın and Professor Bıçakcı would want to add comments, we will welcome these comments. We have here a large audience, so if you wish to ask questions, and we hope that you do, please write them in the chat and we'll do our best to go over them. And I hope we'll have enough time to address at least some of them. So in advance, I apologize for those who won't get any responses here. But we do hope this is the beginning of, of long-term interaction. Our presenters can talk about all sorts of things, but we did pose them 2 main questions to consider. One is regarding what they would see as the next step to upgrade the relations between the 2 states. And the second is a bit different, and that relates to the role of academia and civil society, think tanks, research institutes, other type of civil society organizations in promoting these relations. So without further ado, I guess we can start. And we are starting, as I said, with, I lost my, okay. Who did I say is going to go first?
Çağrı, I think, right?
Sorry?
Was it Çağrı Erhan, was it?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I got lost.
That's what you said.
Yeah, Professor Erhan, please go ahead.
Okay, it's wonderful to be with you. I count more than almost 90 people here. It's a big number, and it's increasing after almost 10 years of lack of this kind of conferences. I know many of us met together in other ways, in covered meetings. This is, I think, one of the first publicly open academic conference in the last 10 years. So I'm very happy to be with you here. When I initiated this conference just in the middle of February, our Israeli colleagues were very reluctant, and they answered us, "Oh, do you think it's timely to organize such a conference?" And within 15 days, everything has changed, because both Turkish and Israeli newspapers announced that Israeli president will pay a visit to Turkey. Herzog will come to Turkey. Nobody in Israel knew about it. Either in Turkey, nobody knew about it, but some others knew about it. And they actually made all kinds of preparations, at least for 2 years, for this historic visit to Turkey. Now, I will come at the end of my speech. What do we expect from now, and what should we expect from future? But first, we have to go back to past, because as a diplomatic historian, I believe the lessons from past can help us to understand today and to predict about the future. I'm just about to conclude a book about the first 2 years of Turkish-Israeli diplomatic relations based on the newly opened Turkish diplomatic archives and already opened Israeli diplomatic archives, and of course American ones. And I realized that there are 3 leap eras in Turkish-Israeli diplomatic relations, which is now 74 years old. The first one is between 1949 and 1952. The second one is 1991 and 1996. And now we are at the threshold of the third one. In all these previous 2 leap eras, there is a power shift in global levels. The first one is just 1 year after the establishment of State of Israel. Turkey, recognized Israel in 1949, March 1949, as the first Muslim state. During this era, it was the creation of bipolar world. It was a start for Cold War dynamics. And Turkey had some perceived some deep threats from Soviet Union that time, but also Turkey and Israel had shared threats from the region, particularly from Syria. Syria used to have some demands over Turkish Alexandria region, and but the main motive behind Turkey's recognition of Israel was not the global scale developments or local developments. It was Turkey's enthusiasm to join the Western alliance. And when we look at the Turkish archival documents, it's not surprising to see that it's quite similar to nowadays, that many of the Turkish diplomats in UN, they offered and they proposed Turkish Minister of Foreign Affairs to establish good relations with Israel, because Israel has a very strong lobby in Washington and in New York. They can force American Congress and American government to include Turkey into the newly established in 1949, newly established NATO. And it was one of the main motives behind Turkey's recognition of Israel in 1949, aside from, of course, hoping assistance from Israeli lobby for financial aid from some Western financial institutions. And in between 1991 and 1996, again, we faced a new power shift. It was again a new world order. It was after the collapse of Soviet Union, and it was after the end of the Cold War. And again, Turkey and Israel perceived some local threats from Syria. Turkey also perceived some threats from, PKK and Iran that time as Israel. But also, when compared to the first one, during the second one, the main basic motive behind Turkey's rapprochement to Israel, which had started 4 years before Madrid Peace Treaty in late 1980s, after Turgut Özal's historic visit to the United States, where Turgut Özal, was a late Turkish president, that time prime minister in 1988. He visited New York and Washington in 1988, and he made a secret meeting with Jewish lobby in Washington. And just after this meeting, Turkish Foundation for 500 years was established, what was signatory for Spanish Jews immigration to Turkey. So it was the 500th anniversary, which would be celebrated in 1992. This foundation was established after Özal's visit to New York in 1988. So the main motive was that Özal saw establishing good relations with Israel would facilitate Turkey's relations with the United States and some European countries. And it proved this way. And now in 2022, we are, I believe, at the brink of a new era. You see the developments around us. There is a power ship, probable power ship between the United States and China, but now we have deep problems stemming from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But apart from this global changing, Turkish motive when starting a new rapprochement with Israel, to say, in conclude, we have to compare the previous attempts for Turkish-Israeli rapprochement. In all of them, Turkey and Israel had some interest. And today, both countries have some interest to improve their ties. But we should keep in mind, nothing will repeat itself. The conditions in mid-1990s and the conditions in late 1940s are quite different than today's conditions. So geopolitical shift is something it repeated itself. So we are at the brink of a new era maybe. We are speaking about a power shift to China, and we are speaking about a new threat emerging from the north, from Russia. But we should keep in mind that Israel's agreements with some Arab countries, including the countries in the Gulf, and Turkey's new politics towards the Mediterranean are the main motives behind new Turkish-Israeli relations. Energy will play an important role in this new scope of relations. You may heard from the news that Turkish energy minister will pay a visit to Israel in next month. And of course, we should not expect a fast development, but both Turkish and Israeli energy investors, I think, have some interest in developing sometimes in this sector, particularly European Union's need for diversification of European energy supplies after Russian invasion of Ukraine could give an impetus to the improvement of Turkish-Israeli energy cooperation. You have talked about the EastMed project, which would pass over Cyprus Island. I think the route from Israel directly to Turkey and from Turkey to Europe is now more feasible and more realistic when compared to route over Cyprus, both in financial terms and in construction term. And I'm sure if Turkey and Israel decides to build such a pipeline, then these two countries will easily find some investors from the West, particularly from the United States and Germany, which would financially take the burden of this construction. And I'm hopeful to find out some shareholders from the Gulf states, among the Gulf states, particularly Qatar and UAE, can take part in this initiative. But at the end, the Turkish enthusiasm to create a new, start a new page for relations with Israel is not only motivated by the energy cooperation. Maybe the issue of Eastern Mediterranean should not be reduced into energy only. This area is a area of sovereignty for Turkey, and the question of maritime limits, maritime borders is much more important than energy cooperation for Turkish public nowadays. Therefore, we should go back to mid-2000s when Southern Cyprus started to sign some demarcation agreements, EEZ demarcation agreements with Egypt and Lebanon and Israel. This told the bells in Turkey, and Turkey all of a sudden found itself in a highly isolated position in the Eastern Mediterranean. Just 3 years ago, you may recall, there was an initiative called Eastern Mediterranean Energy Forum. All countries, all coastal countries were there. Even France, President of France was there, but Turkey was excluded. So Turkey all of a sudden saw itself highly isolated in the region. And this was the main reason behind Turkey's new initiative to start a cooperation with Israel. And this came after Turkey's agreement with Libya 2 years ago. We signed an agreement to shape the southwestern corner of Turkish proposed maritime zone in the region. Finally, as I said previously, we should not expect anything in the past would repeat itself. We cannot have hopes for extensive military relations, extensive defense industry relations, which we have experienced in mid-1990s with Israel and Turkey. But I think there are a lot of hopes for improving more economic and trade relations, and of course, cultural relations. And once more, I would like to thank all organizers of this conference. And I'm sure these conferences will continue to be done face-to-face in both countries throughout the coming years. So thank you all organizers again.
Thank you very much, Professor Erhan. I'm really sorry again for the problems we had in the middle. We have muted everyone except for those who have to speak, so we hope this will at least contain the situation. So I'm very happy to turn the stage now to Dr. Gallia Lindenstrauss. Gallia, please.
Thank you. I want to first thank the Mitvim Institute, the Davis Institute, and the Turkish International Relations Council for inviting me to speak in this important debate. I want to start with the title of this conference was Opportunities and Challenges. So I want to sketch a few opportunities and then sketch a few challenges. So I'll start with the fact that Herzog's visit last week, I think gave us there will be a positive impact of the pictures that came out of Ankara. The pictures of the two leaders side by side, the pictures of the horses with the flags and the national anthem, the Israeli national anthem in Ankara. We didn't have that in 2016 when the normalization agreement was signed. At that time, we only had 2 separate press conferences in different locations. But here we have the two leaders side by side, and I think the symbolic effect of this will be positive. I think we have to seize the moment for a quick return of the ambassadors to Tel Aviv and Ankara. We haven't had high-level representation since 2018, when the events surrounding the US move of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem resulted in a crisis in Turkey-Israeli relations. So this is really important to bring back the ambassadors. And I think one of the important results of Herzog's visit was the decision to establish a dispute settlement mechanism between Turkey and Israel. I think this is an important lesson from the previous failures of the rapprochements between Turkey and Israel. The fact that we will have disputes in the future, and the fact that we have now a mechanism to at least discuss this dispute, I think is a very positive outcome of Herzog's visit. The next unfortunate opportunity, I would say, but it is an opportunity, is the tragic events in Ukraine. We already saw the influence in this session with the Russian hackers. But the tragic events in Ukraine will have, of course, they're already having profound repercussions. The countries have to rethink what are their priorities. And here I think both Israel and Turkey will see some things eye to eye. Both countries are currently mediating between Russia and Ukraine, and just this fact is an impetus for greater coordination. Another opportunity is the fact that the rapprochement between Turkey and Israel is happening in a greater regional context of what we would say is a regional detente. Everybody's talking with everyone. There's much more moderation in the region. And in this respect, I think we will see in the future also collaboration between the UAE, Turkey, and Israel. We saw that already before the rapprochement between Israel and Turkey, there was a rapprochement between Turkey and the UAE. So this triangle of cooperation, UAE, Turkey, and Israel, I think we will see give fruits in the future. A third opportunity I would like to mention is the issue of climate change and renewable energy. President Herzog highlighted these issues in his visits to Athens and Nicosia before going to Ankara. And this is, I think, really something that we will see cooperation between the actors, especially that we know that there is a need for solutions in the regional level for all these very difficult issues of climate change. So this is something I think also Turkey and Israel can move ahead with. And lastly, regarding Gallia's questions, I think that us as academics should cooperate also in difficult times. And indeed, I see many friends on this Zoom event which we did manage to cooperate over the years of the crisis. But obviously, when there's positive vibes and encouragement from governments, that helps. So in this respect, I think the rapprochement in the political level will also trickle down to the academics. Now, unfortunately, I move to the challenges. Of course, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is an issue that has had manifestations in also crisis moments in Turkey-Israeli relations. We all know these crisis moments. We know that Ramadan and Passover are approaching, and there might be a flare-up like we had last year, and that again the countries will have to somehow deal with the fact that and make sure that we don't see what happened in 2018 repeat itself. We know also that as Israeli academics have problem in other parts of the world, we do have problems with academics with political left leaning, also related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So this is another challenge in the sphere of academic cooperation. And of course, the issue of the continuing presence of Hamas military activity in Turkey. There was negotiations between the sides on this issue before Herzog's visit. Hopefully there will be positive results in this respect, but unfortunately, I don't think they will be completely expelled from Turkey. So this issue of Hamas military operatives on Turkish soil will be again an issue in the future that will will likely have a negative effect on relations. Another challenge, and this issue was mentioned before, is the Turkish emphasis on the export of gas from Israel to Turkey. This has been voiced by President Erdogan himself, and of course also mentioned by the previous speaker. So yes, in some ways, the war in Ukraine is causing renewed interest in Eastern Mediterranean gas, and everyone wants to reduce its dependence on Russian gas. But the obstacles that we had till now, such as the Cyprus issue, the fact that the quantities in the Eastern Mediterranean are not that much, they're still in place. So the fact that there is pressure from the Turkish side to proceed in the gas issue, but it's not sure that it will materialize, that's probably another challenge. And lastly, the last challenge I want to mention is that Turkey-Israel rapprochement is not the only game in town. We saw that with the Abraham Accords, there are many new opportunities for Israel in the political side, but also in the economic side and in tourism. I'll just give you an example. Last week, we had a big Turkish trade delegation coming to Israel, but today we have a trade delegation coming from Morocco. So these things are, of course, in some competition. And I think there's a big contrast to earlier periods when Turkey was one of the few, at times the only country in the Middle East which we had good relations. So this time around, it's different. Of course, also Israel's close relations with Cyprus and Greece in the past decade can also influence Turkey-Israeli relations, especially if there will be some sort of return to the tensions we saw in the Eastern Mediterranean in 2020. Of course, we also saw this week on Sunday encouraging pictures of the Greek Prime Minister in Ankara, and I hope we will see these pictures continue. But if we will be back to the tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean, then this will also be a problem in Turkey-Israeli relations. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gallia. Okay, we move on to Professor Meliha Altunışık, right? Did I say this right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Actually, many of the things have already been said, about this relationship. I will just start by saying that, I look at this bilateral relationship within the two important developments that have been happening in recent years in the region. One is that the regional politics have been changing to some extent because for a long time the regional politics was characterized by zero-sum, increasing competition and fragmentation and polarization in the region, establishment of blocs competing with each other. But in the last 2 years, we started to see some shifts in this regional environment. And Turkey has been at the forefront of this, actually, because in many of the normalization efforts, you see Turkey involved. Turkey has been trying to normalize its relations with the UAE, which were quite problematic before. There are some attempts to normalize with Saudi Arabia, again, which was in the counter bloc, and with Egypt and with Israel. So, but this is not just limited to Turkey. I mean, there was of course, reference to Abraham Accords, another, wave of normalization between Israel and some Arab countries. And also we see Saudis and Iranians talking, and UAE, Emiratis and Iranians talking. So in general, there seems to be some change in regional politics, reduction in competition in the region. So Turkey-Israeli changes in Turkey-Israeli relations, I think, should be located within this general context, although, of course, in each of these bilateral dynamics have their own elements, components, but it's happening in a larger context. The second general point I would like to make is that in a way, the regional boundaries have become more have expanded, and this region has become more integrated with the Eastern Mediterranean, which meant that Greece and Cyprus are now part of this larger region. So does Horn of Africa. And so this, of course, expansion of the region in a way creates new challenges, because with the expansion towards Eastern Mediterranean, clearly the Cyprus conflict, which is a protracted conflict, or Turkey-Greek cooperation also has become part of the Middle Eastern regional complex. So this, in a way, complicates the situation in the region. So these are two general points that we need to sort of locate Turkey-Israel relations and changing relations between the two countries. And I believe that the normalization is happening due to various factors. There are global regions like, I don't like the term US withdrawal, but US redefinition of its engagement with the Middle East is an important point. Russia now, Ukraine war will have repercussions clearly on this as well. The difficulties of sustaining militaristic and zero-sum problems for many, zero-sum politics for many regional countries have been important. Domestic politics, economic problems that countries are facing, etc., or economic opportunities that they see, are all these factors, I think, play a role in all of these dyads, and including in Turkey-Israeli relations. This process is going on for some time. But the problem, the question is, to what extent this would be a real transformation in regional politics, whether this will be just a pause in conflictual regional relations, or whether this normalization efforts will transform the region and also bilateral relations. So this is still not clear, and this will be very important for Turkey-Israeli relations as well. Coming specifically to Turkey-Israeli relations, of course, one of the important characteristics of this relationship is that despite increasingly very problematic political relations, trade relations, economic relations continue to prosper, and in a way challenge sort of this liberal perspective that if you develop economic relations and if you develop trade relations, this will spill over to political relations. It did not spill over to political relations in the case of Turkey and Israel. Now there is, especially on Turkish part, there seems to be the inclusion of energy relations to this bilateral relations, but it is, I think, more problematic than trade relations, because energy relations are not just about energy, but they are also about delimitation of exclusive economic zones. So clearly very much related with sovereignty issues. So I have doubts about, just expanding it to energy and to basically continue to compartmentalize political relations with energy relations, because it's difficult to compartmentalize in this case. I say this that you can compartmentalize so much, So I think in this case, you need to expand to general normalization of relations for to have cooperation in energy. And there are obviously, limitations there as well. Gallia already mentioned, all the limitations. I agree. For instance, the Palestinian issue, if there's a flare-up in the Palestinian issue, this will directly impact Turkey-Israel relations. Turkey's, Israel's relations with Greece and Cyprus can impose limitations. But when you look at it, I think you need to look at this normalization in general. I mean, it is also mentioned that Turkey and Greece can come closer as a result of what's happening in Ukraine, for instance. Or Turkey is trying to normalize with Egypt as well. So, Israel may find an interest in engaging with Turkey because of, engagement of other actors with Turkey. So, there could be a window of opportunity to do so. Similarly, Turkey should overcome its problems of normalizing with other countries. But overall, I am still not convinced that there is a real shift in regional normalization. I mean, I tend to see this adjustment by regional powers. I'm a bit concerned that we may return to sort of more competition in regional politics. And if that's the case, of course, there would be also limitations on Turkey and Israel relations. What could be the next step? I mean, that was asked. I also think that appointment of ambassadors should be the next step, because this would be a sine qua non of normalization. I mean, if you don't have ambassadors in each other's country, then you cannot even have a normal conversation about issues that are interested. Even if you don't agree on things, you know, there has to be some channel of communication between the two countries. What could be the second question, the role of academic civil society? I mean, it's always important to talk, of course, at the societal level, because especially in the case of Turkish-Israeli relations, you know, in both sides, I think the media, the politicians have really used a very hostile language against each other. I mean, this happened in Turkey. This also happened in Israel, and they really demonized each other in those, you know, in the last 10 years or so. In order to, you know, transform that, there needs to be a new language, and of course, opinion makers and academics, civil society organizations can be important in changing that. But ultimately, I would say that it's the political will that would matter. I mean, if the politicians really decide to improve relations, they can really shift public opinion. We had seen this before. I mean, prior to 1990s, for instance, Israeli image in Turkey was not very popular, but through political will, we started to have relations at all levels, tourism, people-to-people relations, academic exchanges, etc. So political level is the critical actor here, I would say. If they shift their languages and if they you know, stop using hostile discourses against each other, this would also be transformative in terms of the relationship. And let me stop here. Thank you for listening.
Apologies. Thank you very much. I'm still muted. Am I muted?
No, you're okay.
I'm okay. Okay, I keep getting this. Okay. Thank you very much, Meliha. A lot of food for thought, and I'm holding my horses not to ask anything. And we'll move on to Dr. Gil Murciano, our CEO of Mitvim. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be short because the Russian hackers took, I think, a certain amount of our time. First of all, I mean, to your second question, and here I'm really continuing Meliha's point about the importance of civil society and academia in this upgrade or with this improving relations. I think we are experiencing it. I mean, in events such as this one, you know, the ability to start discussing the strategic issues, to take a step back and to reflect on the topics itself, and to really try not just to start new dynamics, but to join the first initial relations or the attempts to improve the relations and provide all kinds of options on that form. So I joined Professor Erhan in celebrating this. I mean, we don't get a lot of chances to celebrate in celebrating this opportunity, and I really convening this leading group of thinkers and hoping that this is basically a starting point. I'm also going to continue Meliha's point regarding what differentiates this time from previous attempts, from 2016, from other locations. When we speak about the next phase of relations, I agree that ambassadors is definitely first. By the way, also because of practical reasons, you know, if we speak about new
frameworks regarding trade, regarding energy, and otherwise you need the actual capacity on the ground. And we haven't had it for 4 years already. The embassies are there, but the charge of affairs, the level of diplomatic representation is obviously limiting us on the practical level. There's a discussion about visits. I know that there was an invitation, maybe visits of executive, Israeli elected members or ministers. President Herzog enjoys the special status of an emissary, but a formal visit, maybe a formal visit of Turkish officials to Israel. You know, all those things seems very symbolic, you know, very almost as open as empty gestures to those that speak only about hard power and about realpolitik. But we have to also emphasize the role of trust building. I think one of the major points that separates this one from the previous, where we might be able to create a new framework, is through the issue of trust building, especially after very long years of bad blood, of harsh rhetorics from both sides, of disagreements, of, you know, even realignment in different camps, seemingly. And this issue goes through those gestures. You know, I mean, it sounds as if when we speak about the world of international politics, issues of honor and humiliation have dictated, shaped the relations in the past, you know, from low and high chairs to the, of course, the tragic Navi Marmara incident and to the harsh rhetorics during the Gaza war. So the issue of honoring instead of humiliating, the ability here is to change the public discourse, very slow change, of course, a very long process, but to change the public discourse for 2 reasons. First of all, to create relations between people. We conduct, by the way, a survey at Mitvim every year, examining the public views in Israel. We always ask about the sense of urgency to upgrade the relations with Turkey. And we see a growing increase from every year, basically. But still, when you look at the media coverage of this visit, you see an ambivalent approach, at least by the Israeli media. I learned it is the same situation, to say the least, also from the Turkish side. So the ability to change the public discourse, both on the level of connection between people, but also creating domestic incentives and domestic support for a fundamental change or a more substantial change in the framework of relations is crucial here in order to differentiate this one from the previous one. I think that the real test that we are going to see after the level of ambassadors, after the upgrading of basic relations, is the ability to start a strategic dialogue. Strategic dialogue doesn't relate to strategic relations, but basically strategic discussion about the topics, the shared interest, the really wide, broad range of shared interest between the parties. You know, a Turkish colleague of mine actually defined it as a normalization of necessity. You know, it's no longer a nice to have in the global development that were covered by my colleagues here. First of all, the growing global friction that will put both Israel and Turkey as regional powers, basically, in a very tough spot, but also the opportunities, the breaking off of the old rigid alliances. You know, we used to speak about Qatar, Turkey versus Israel and the Arab Quartet versus luckily, we are living in a different reality right now, where the lines separating those camps blur. Meliha and Professor Erhan mentioned the issue of the normalization between Turkey and UAE, and the first signs of normalization between Turkey and Egypt. It creates a whole new set of possible alliances. When we speak about strategic dialogue, we speak about Syria, we speak about Iran, we speak about the collapse of Lebanon, basically. Dynamics that are bound to affect our issues in Turkey, in Israel, not just on the global settings. So I speak here about the need to conduct this strategic discussion. And then the next phase really is when we speak about joint forums. Now, there have been a couple of discussions beforehand about bilateral connections, whether it is about energy, about the connection between Levitan and the Turkish pipeline in Iskandron, all kinds of different issues. I think the real test is if we can create new frameworks. New frameworks, one of the major issues is obviously the issue of climate change that was mentioned before here. I think the story here is clear to everybody. We are the hotbed of the implication of the climate crisis. We've seen it with major fires and natural disasters in Turkey, in Greece, all over the Mediterranean in the last couple of years. The incentive is clear. Really, the incentive is clear here for cooperation. I think it's only symbolic that Herzog is the one to visit Turkey. He's the representative of the green vision for the Mediterranean, with Turkey playing a major role in this discussion. So the ability to start new frameworks, and one framework that was mentioned here, and I think it's a crucial and fascinating and very interesting option, is the issue of a forum for renewable energies that supports the goal on confronting climate change, and in the same instance also support the political development, bringing together Israel, Turkey, Egypt, maybe also Greece, and other actors within this issue. So the ability here is maybe to even use the relations with Israel, the improving relations, as a bridge, as a platform to even improve other aspects of Turkish relations with Mediterranean partners in the region. And I'm just going to end with the last instance regarding our role here. So, I mean, part of, it was said about Herzog, that Herzog has the advantage to go to places where Bennett and Lapid, the formal officials cannot go because of domestic reasons, because of coalitions issues. I'm sure that we have those considerations in both sides. But think tanks and academic organizations have the same advantage. We are able to go places and we can discuss and start a dialogue in order to inform and to enrich and to provide tangible options for both civil servants and policymakers on that level. And second of all, I think that there's a great value in trying to envision some of those forums that we discuss, envisioning them with Turkey as a member, Turkey as an integral part of those discussions. I know that in Litvim, we are trying to do two directions. One, in the direction of a forum for renewable energy, where Turkey plays an important role. And the second one, through our Mediterranean Forum, trying to start a discussion between think tanks, between thinkers, between academic researchers, about the effect of the global development on our situation altogether. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gil. Lots of work ahead of us, huh? Yeah, okay. Professor Aydın, I'm sure you have something to add to this discussion. So the floor is yours if you wish. Okay, I see. Unmute.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, in the consideration of saving time, we already lost quite a lot, and I think the first speakers have covered substantial ground, and I'm very happy to leave the ground for other participants to ask questions to enlarge. Just one suggestion regarding the role of academia, civil society, and etc. Of course, I'm not naive in this part of the world to believe that in this part of the world, the civil society can make a change without input from the governments. In fact, I wrote a paper with a colleague of mine about 10 years ago, arguing the otherwise, that it's impossible in this part of the world without the government initiatives to start doing things. However, having said this, I'm also a firm believer of the role of civil society as coming from part of it. And I'll suggest something in between. There is something that I'm personally involved. It is called Greek-Turkish Forum, which was established in 1995, just right after Turkey and Greece almost went to war. And it was established by former or recently retired officials from both sides and invited academics and think tankers also and journalists to act as a 1.5 track diplomacy. It's not second track, it's a 1.5. It is an independent organization, but it's supported by the government. It doesn't have a public role, but it talks to each other, and its only role is to keep the channels open, the channels of communications open in times of crisis. So for example, in the summer of 2020, when Turkey and Greece were really quarreling again about the ISMET, Turkish Greek Forum was meeting regularly every 15 days almost, or a month, even though we were not able to meet face to face. We used the Zoom environment and etc. And we just report back to the government and try to give them suggestions out of the box. This is something I think could be utilized in Turkish-Israeli relations. Having a place of not being in the public allows many people to participate who otherwise would not be participating in such an environment. And you can get every kind of people in that kind of possibilities. And I think that's a good example. So I'll just throw that out in here. And secondly, of course, this is a very good start with UİK and MİTVİM and all the institutions are involved here. We can continue with this easily and build upon on this, the public relations. And I really believe that we need to change, as Gil already mentioned, this public discourse, which is very important to change the public discourse. To counter the public discourse or wider public discourse, because that's the base of trust building. Trust is not only built between the decision makers; it has to be built from ground up and from the between the publics as well. And I'll have final suggestion, since MİTVİM is doing public surveys in Israel, since I'm doing with UİK also participating public surveys in Turkey. Let's collaborate, do a joint public survey in Turkey and Israel and compare notes and come up with suggestions. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. That's actually a very interesting idea. Okay. Last but not least, Salih, would you like to add your insights? I should say that Salih played a very central role in organizing this event, the behind the scenes, the coordinating. So I want to convey my thanks to you. Okay, you're very modest, but this should be said. Oh, the unmute thing, yeah, unmute.
Okay, thank you, Gallia. I think we have to, I want to shortly frame the point, what we can change, what we can change, right? Herzog visit, he said, he talked about sedimentation, what we have in the past, right? We cannot change all the problems, failures in the past. That is the past. But what we can change is the future. The biggest problem, we have to change our understanding of relationship between the two countries. Quid pro quo is not the way we have to pursue in the coming days. I know that most of the political people, bureaucrats, thinks that this is the only way and the benefits and realist approach, I understand this, but the identity of the societies are really changing and how they perceive threats and insecurities day by day is quickly changing. And this is valid for our societies as well. And what the governments do have the problems, but the societies is on the different valleys. So what we have to build, what Gil said, I'm going to be linked, we have to build up communication. What kind of a communication? We have to build more non-state communication channels. State build up communication channels is not helping us because in time of crisis, they're not working for us. What Mustafa just said is totally true. We need to build up a channels is a politics proof, which if there is any problems, any conflict, any friction, we should have to continue our communication. And the sense of the age, we need agile communication channels because, and Israel knows this very well because I know very much of the Israeli academicians who are expert on the Palestinian issue, they do this kind of communication on the Palestinian side as well in multilateral countries, like in Europe, in different places. We can arrange this kind of communications as well. Second of all, what we have to build up, the youngsters should have to be communicate between each other because the Israeli society where we left in 2010, then the Turkish society, young society in 2010 and 22 are totally different. And even interests are different. So we should have to build up connection channels that we can build up. It's more than the appointing ambassadors, because appointing ambassadors is something, again, political, and it is not helping us. I mean, I'm always saying this. If we feel that we have some hostility, not to make the hostility, but let's compete between each other. I mean, let's see, we have the hacking here, right? Or the disruption here. Let's make the Israeli cybersecurity experts fight or compete with the Turkish ones. One's in Tel Aviv, other time in Israel, Istanbul or Ankara. Let's like backgammon. Backgammon is one of the places that the Israelis like very, very much to play. And the Turkish people really love to play. Let's make a competition. Even shawarma and the doner, we can make a competition about the cuisine, right? These kind of materials are really critical for us to compete, because every competition is building up channels between the parties. And we are neglecting this issue. If we forget to communicate, even via computing, then we cannot find a ground to commonalities. We need to build up a commonalities. That is what I'm saying. Let's make a coffee. I mean, Israelis love the coffee, I know it. Even they have a Cafe Turkey, right? We have a Turkish coffee. Let's cook and compete. Who is the winner? Agriculture. This is one of the fields Israelis have, and Turkish agricultural field is improving also. Let's have the best tomato cultivated in both countries. Make a ceremony of this. These are the most important participants we can compete. And this competition builds up more communication channels we can easily use, like non-state municipal layers. Municipal layers of a communication is one of the necessities. We did not use it. Universities, like Mustafa just said, is important. Like I know the Demirel Foundation communication that the Israeli students coming to Turkey, Turkish students going to Israel, expertise and knowing the field and feeling what the ground problem is, make more connection, more robust connection between the parties. And this is the requirement for the future. Otherwise, it's not going to function, because politics always have a quarrel and conflict between each other. And we will, again, in 10 years' time, we will sit down and talk what will be the future of the Israelis and what is the East Mediterranean going, what is Lebanon is doing, what is Iran is doing. These are not the cases. If we have the commonality, we can build up more cooperation over top of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm hungry for all these competitions, you know, not the cyber thing, but the food. Okay, Gil wanted to add another comment. And then I know I said at the beginning that you should write your questions in the chat, but the diligent of you have noted that there is no chat on the Zoom. So so after Gil, I will, you know, just raise your hand and we'll have about 20 minutes and we can collect questions, comments, and then we can do a last round among the our speakers to see if they have things to add to that. Okay. Thank you, Gil. The floor is yours.
Yeah, in 60 seconds, I just think that Salih mentioned here something that is very important, because when we do differentiate between past attempts and this one, and the role of civil society, the major question is resilience. You know, in the past, you could see how we create connections on the, you know, point-to-point relations, and then something happens, mostly on the Palestinian arena, but also domestically in each country and whatever you. And this entire improvement is, you know, you basically go back to square one. So the ability to take the framework built by the strategic level, and here I do agree with Mustafa, you need this specific political platform, but then it's up to us to fill this framework with content, to create enough points of contact and diversification of the type of relations, which can actually survive and create a more resilient approach. So you know what, if I have to change my answer to your question about civil society, it's nice to envision forms, but first it's exactly what Salih said. It's about creating, bringing the content and creating resilience for this relation. So that's just, you know, just a comment at the end, at the last moment.
Thank you very much, Gil. Okay, so for now we have two hands up, so we will start there. And if anyone else wants to raise additional points, you're more than welcome. So we have Gadi Shoshan, hi, and we have Zoe Gasimov, right? And oh, we have three. And Alexander, I have to read this. Piperis. Okay. Gadi, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm working with Ormat, but I'm also the president of the Israeli-Turkish Chamber of Commerce. And we have been the unofficial communicator in the last years, and it was enlightening and very interesting to hear all what the people here says. We definitely would like to see the politics moving forward. It's a very important step, and but it's all coming back to economics. The fact that we have business relations allows us to also go and build the foundation for whatever going above it. I'm not underestimating the political side, definitely not. We have today some charged affairs, Roy Gilad in the past and Udi Eitan and Irit Lilian today, which doing an excellent job in Turkey, and understand. But only recently, Turkey positioned a new economical attaché in Israel, which I met a couple of days ago, and we still don't have one in Turkey. And I think the next step, much more before the ambassador, is to put an economical attaché over there. It's much more of an actual act of showing the need to communicate on the real basis. Again, I'm not underestimating the political side. It's important. We have pacts, we have economical pacts that has to be renewed, and they've been abandoned and neglected for too long right now, has to be sit around. And I think above all, what I think everybody should remember, we are in this big bathtub that calls the Mediterranean Middle East. Everybody's equal. We are not more important than Turkey or Greek or Cyprus or Lebanon. If we all cooperate, if we all talk, and we'll all have business relations, we all be happy. And it's only one person, enough one person to blow it all up, as we see right now what's going on in Ukraine. And we have to make sure that we don't have any such people around. And this also calls for some modesty from everybody. Okay, we are not better than anybody else. And this way, I just want to add one more note. Some of my friends will be angry, but I think we have a bit of an immature media covering Herzog trip to Turkey. There were too much emphasis from the Israeli media on how bad it was in the past, exactly what Salih Bey just said before. We are here, the past is past. We have to start a new era. We have to bring things forward. Whatever we did in the past for the economy should now be influenced and on all the people who were not aware of it. So this forum here is fantastic. I learned a lot of things from very clever people here, and I really hope to keep on cooperating with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gadi. Yeah, I completely agree with the need to be a little more modest. And if I may interject in the middle as the moderator, my impression is that we tend to look at things, either things were terrible, they need the drama as if there's not enough. So either things were terrible, and now what's at stake is that we're going to have full normalization, things will be wonderful. And this is the recipe for disappointment and discouragement and frustration. So I think being modest in our optimistic but modest in our expectations is really, really important. Okay, so okay, Zoe, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gallia. I would just, it's great to join you here today. I remember one of the meetings of the Turkish-Israeli Civil Society Group. It was in one very nice hotel in one of the upper floor with a very nice panorama on the Bosporus some 5-6 years ago, with Salih Bey being also there. So it's great that the dialogue is boosted up. I think what is very important on my point of view, I mean, this very important step was done, the visit of Israeli President to Ankara. It was great to see two flags all together. The last time I have seen them all together was in Baku, in the car courses 2 years ago. So that's a place where you can see the flags close to each other. So it was great to see that in Ankara as well. I guess what would boost up the cooperation between two countries is to establish Hebrew language at the Turkish universities. There was one modern textbook of Hebrew language written in Turkish by Eldar Hasanov, I guess a graduate of Marmara University. But if you compare that with a very strong Turkology in Israel of Eyal Ginyo and of many others, so you have a huge interest of the young students on Ottoman language, on Turkish language in general. And I guess the boost of Hebrew language would open new vistas for cooperation and new vistas also for interest among the students to look at Israel through the lens of comprehension and of understanding of its literature, arts, and so on. I would maybe go in that direction as well. So we need definitely more people being aware of modern Hebrew language in Turkey. So thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you, Zoe. I agree with you. We're expanding to other, to the fine arts are a part of this as well, and the humanities and the Alginio, definitely. Okay, we have two more hands up, and so yeah, Alexander, let's hear you, and then we have Emre, right? Oh, okay, that Emre and Luis Fishman, and then if you can all be short.
Yes.
Unmute thing, yeah.
Yes, thank you to all the speakers. My question would actually be short. I actually look on international politics through a neo-realist perspective, and my question would be, if we look at international politics, I see that states do not have eternal friends and states do not have eternal enemies, but states have eternal interests. So my short question would be the high security interests of Israelis right now, the containment of Iranian expansionism. So what is the role of Turkey in containing Iran in the Middle East? That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And Alexander, now you can talk, right? Yeah.
Shalom and
I asked questions and then I unmute you. Sorry.
Okay. Shalom and merhaba from Greece, Athens. I would like to ask you, and first of all, to thank all the panel for this kind, actual invitation. Very nice meeting. In any case, I would like to ask the panelists, especially Mustafa Hoca, if the second track diplomacy or the kind of a public diplomacy is enough in order to repair the damage which happened in the Turkish-Israeli relations. Just to refer in the last Turkish trend survey from Kadir Has University conducted from Aydın Hoca, that Israel is the second country which is perceived as a threat from Turkish people. Israel received very, very low position as a country in order to repair its relation with Turkey. I think it's received the second to the last position, and only 3% of the Turkish population consider Israel as a friend. Meanwhile, and from the Israel side, I would like to ask if the security apparatus, and I can refer to the ex-head of Mossad, Ilan Mizrahi, and Ben Barak, or the head of Mossad, Yossi Cohen, which thinks Turkey that is a bigger menace than Iran to Israel, that Turkey possesses a biggest threat. I mean, can we really repair this irrevocable damage which happened in the Turkish-Israeli relations?
Thank you, Alexander. Good questions. We'll have little time to answer them, but a lot of time to think about them. So finally, Luis, did I ask to unmute? Okay.
Yes, greetings to everyone. I have to go to class in about 8 minutes. So, Ellen, it's Louis. It's not Louis.
Just Louis, sorry. Apologies.
Louis. Yeah, I'm above all of you. Okay, very good. So I just want to say that my assessment, I think what we're missing out here, I think maybe it was highlighted a bit. I think looking at it over 20 years closely, living in both places, back and forth closely. First of all, I would like to address the part about Hebrew. Hebrew's been taught there many years off and on, and it lacks serious funding, whether it's by Turkey's interest in investing in it and Israel's interest in investing it. I think this is what we see is that there is not, it hasn't been a serious period where either country was really interested in paying the money. I think that's what it comes down, is paying the money for these and for the exchanges that Salih, what you're also talking about, right? Competitions are great, everything is fantastic, but in the end, it's going to have to, in my opinion, come to, first of all, working relationships between the countries. And that's why I wrote just my latest article that, of course, we'll start with the ambassadors and we should take slow steps. It's very small steps. What's interesting here, though, is not comparing with 2016, is the major switch, and I'll be quick, with the way Turkey is perceiving Israel, or that the huge U-turn that Erdogan has taken. And the difference is that in 2016, the country, Turkey itself, was much more unstable. It was right before the failed coup attempt, the attacks on the airport, different things which I highlighted before these happened, that Turkey really wasn't a stable country. Now, we can look at domestic issues, how this is going to play out, of course, with elections coming up next year. It's going to be interesting to see, but I think there has been a serious switch in the Turkish government to say we really want to improve relations, and it'll be interesting to see the disappointment on their side if they don't play out how they like them, how they like this to play out. So we're going to have to see, because of course Israel's they have their hands full. I mean, they are working in, like someone mentioned, Morocco, Abu Dhabi, UAE, different things like that. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be hard, because I really think that Turkey sees this as purely almost transactional relations. And it's going to be, and the natural gas, thinking that it actually is going to happen, which I think is going to be a hard deal to make. But anyways, it was a great talk, and enjoyed listening to you all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Louis. Okay, we have 5 more minutes before we need to close up. So I suggest that we go back to our speakers and do a quick round if you want to respond to one of the questions that was raised here, or bring up something like last minute important things for food for thought. Gallia, do you want to start maybe? You don't have to. Yeah. Oh, and I need to unmute you. Yeah. Somehow I received this power now to unmute people.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the questions, quick responses. With regard to the trade, definitely, I think an economic attaché, Israeli economic attaché in Turkey is a good idea. There is this perception that despite the political tensions, trade was always going well, which is true for the Turkish exports to Israel. But in terms of Israel exports to Turkey, they were not that impressive, and they were not that diversified. And here, I think also this is an area that Israel can develop. With regard to the question of Iran, I think there shouldn't be too much enthusiasm about Israeli-Turkish cooperations against Iran. I don't think that is in the cards, but definitely the role Turkey has in containing Iran in northern Syria, in northern Iraq, also inadvertently also has benefits to Israel. So I don't see direct cooperation on this issue, but it does. There is a role for Turkey to play, of course, as a regional power in containing Iran. Thank you.
Thank you, Gallia. Çağrı, would you like to add something?
Yes, the resilience of relations was underlined. It's quite important and correct. This is just 6 years after our last meeting in 2016. 6 years is a very long term. I think we have lack of a permanent platform, at least in the level of academics or think tankers, whatever. So I think this time we should not miss this opportunity. After this historic visit of President Herzog, and I think Turkish government officials will also pay visit, and 2022 will witness the appointment of ambassadors mutually, we should establish a permanent and firm Turkish-Israeli academic cooperation platform. This can be done through bilateral agreements between two prominent universities of Israel and Turkey. This can be done through creating a foundation completely for this sense, and I'm sure the financial assistance will come from Turkish and Israeli chambers of commerce, or at least the associations of exporters. They are in Turkey, at least I know, they are ready to assist, and Turkish TOBB for 25 years now is the main financial sponsor for any this kind of initiative in Israel. Therefore, I recommend as a conclusion of my speech in this first event of Turkish-Israeli academic encounters is to work hard for creating a platform, a center, a joint center, which will not be influenced by any kind of political catastrophes in the future. For sure they will come. And this relation is very delicate. We had faced this. In any incident in the future days, we can just go back to the beginning. So we should keep our academic, at least, context independent from political developments between these two countries. And this can only be done by establishing a permanent, firm platform depending on independent financial sources. Thanks once more for all organizers and for participants for this very important event.
Thank you so much. Meliha, any last words?
Okay, well, just briefly on trade relations. I mean, I agree that trade relations could develop even further if there is political normalization. And in terms of Iran, I also don't think that there could be a strategic cooperation in the issue of Iran, because Turkey's and Israel's perception of Iran and their threat perceptions are very different. But I think the fact that Turkey is soft balancing also Iran in Syria and in Iraq creates a strategic context for relationship, not necessarily strategic cooperation, but a strategic context. Thank you.
Thank you. Mustafa, would you like to give us the final words for this meeting? Something optimistic.
Just to thank everybody, the organizers, the participants and attendants. I'd like to thank you. I like to think that this is the first of many meetings or similar meetings and cooperation. I think we showed an initiative here, and we should follow that initiative. This is the things to come. Thank you again, and I'm hopeful for the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the participants. Gil, if you want to say last words, I feel bad, I left you out.
No, I think Mustafa gave the last finale. Really, I couldn't do it better. I mean, I join the direction that you set forward. And the real issue here is to try and to think about platforms that would make it, as you mentioned, permanent and systemic kind of exchange of knowledge. And I'm looking forward to examine those options. So thank you very much for the participation. And we hope, if the Russian hackers didn't come in, I mean, we have a clear incentive to have the next meeting face-to-face in whatever setting that we choose. But I'm really looking forward to that. And I also want to thank our audience. I mean, the part that didn't try to destroy the discussion altogether.
Which is the majority. Okay.
The majority, of course.
So thank you all for joining us. Thank you very much for all of our participants from Turkey and from Israel. And I wish you a good week, I guess. little snow, no COVID, and anything you want. We'll see you again soon, I hope. להתראות.